Sometimes the most dangerous deals are written in desperation, not ink. Dust dances in the golden light of a forgotten garage, where calloused hands work metal and memories with equal precision. Outside, the world has moved on. Corporations swallow dreams. Medical bills pile higher than hope, and time steals memories one synapse at a time. They say you can tell everything about a person by what they're willing to sacrifice. For him, it was 20 years in uniform in the quiet dignity of honest work. For her, it was warmth, connection, all sacrificed at the altar of medical innovation. Both warriors in different battlefields, both carrying scars invisible to the naked eye. Now fate has forged an unholy alliance between them, a marriage of convenience measured in dollars and days. But when blood is spilled and threats whispered in the dark, the line between pretense and protection begins to blur. In a world where truth is merely another commodity to be bought and sold, they're about to discover that some performances become real the moment the first shot is fired. The autumn wind cut across Lake Tahoe with a sharp edge that promised an early winter. Eleanor Blackwood gripped the leather-wrapped steering wheel of her 1969 Mercedes 280 SL convertible and cursed under her breath as the engine coughed, sputtered, and finally died with an unceremonious shudder. The vintage roadster rolled to a stop along the winding mountain road, surrounded by towering pines that seemed to mock her predicament. "Perfect. Just perfect," she muttered, reaching for her phone. No signal. Of course. At 52, Eleanor Ellie, to the few who dared call her, that had built Blackwood Technologies from a struggling startup into a medical device powerhouse. She'd navigated boardroom battles, hostile takeover attempts, and industry revolutions, but now found herself defeated by a temperamental fuel pump on a deserted mountain road. The irony wasn't lost on her. She popped the hood and stared at the immaculate engine bay. Despite her appreciation for fine engineering, diagnosing automotive ailments wasn't in her skill set. The board meeting at the Lakeside Resort was in 3 hours the most critical presentation of her career. Without it, 12 years of work would likely end with Syntec absorbing her company and shuttering her groundbreaking neural implant project. A flash of movement in her side mirror caught her attention. A black SUV with tinted windows had slowed down, pulling onto the shoulder about 50 yards behind her. Relief flooded through her until she noticed the vehicle's occupants weren't rushing to offer assistance. 3 men emerged, moving with deliberate purpose, scanning the road in both directions. Something about their body language triggered a warning bell in Ellie's mind. This wasn't a good Samaritan stop. The tallest of the 3 pointed at her car and made a cutting gesture. They began moving toward her, spreading out across the road. Ellie's heart hammered in her chest. Her hand moved to her purse, fingers wrapping around the small canister of pepper spray she carried. She'd take her chances in the woods rather than face whatever these men had planned. Just as she prepared to abandon the vehicle, the rumble of an approaching engine broke the tension. A battered blue 1970s Ford pickup rounded the curve, slowing as it approached the scene. The driver, a broad-shouldered man with salt and pepper hair, assessed the situation with a quick, practiced glance. The 3 men from the SUV hesitated, exchanging glances before the leader made a subtle hand signal. They retreated to their vehicle, feigning the casual demeanor of travelers, simply stretching their legs. The pickup pulled alongside Ellie's Mercedes. The driver rolled down his window, revealing a weathered face with lines that spoke of outdoor work and hard-earned wisdom. Despite the circumstances, Ellie found herself noting his striking blue eyes, alert and evaluating, missing nothing. "Car trouble?" he asked, his voice a deep rumble that matched his rugged appearance. "Yes," Ellie replied, maintaining her composure despite the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. "It just died on me." The man's gaze shifted briefly to the SUV behind them, then back to Ellie. "Mind if I take a look? Name's Jack. Jack Ramsey." "Eleanor Blackwood," she said, debating her options. The men in the SUV were still watching. "And yes, I'd appreciate that." Jack pulled his truck ahead and parked. As he exited the vehicle, Ellie noticed his movements were fluid and purposeful. He stood approximately 6 feet tall, with the solid build of a man who'd spent his life doing physical work. though age had softened some of the hardness. He wore faded jeans, work boots, and a flannel shirt under a worn leather jacket, entirely unremarkable, except for the way he carried himself. As he approached the Mercedes, Jack positioned himself between Ellie and the SUV, an action so subtle she almost missed it. "Beautiful car," he said, running his hand appreciatively along the hood. "Don't see many of these on the road anymore." "It was my father's," Ellie explained, surprised by her willingness to share this detail with a stranger. Jack nodded and bent over the engine bay. His hands moved with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what they were looking for. "When did it start giving you trouble?" "About 10 minutes ago. It sputtered a few times, then just died." Jack checked various components before straightening up. "Fuel pump's gone. You're not going anywhere without a replacement." The SUV's engine roared to life behind them. Jack's posture stiffened almost imperceptibly as he watched the vehicle through the Mercedes side mirror. The SUV accelerated past them, the occupants now studiously avoiding looking in their direction. Once it disappeared around the bend, Jack's shoulders relaxed slightly. "Friends of yours?" "Hardly," Ellie replied dryly. He nodded, seeming to make a decision. "Look, I have a shop about 20 miles back in Oak Ridge. I can tow you there. Fix this up. Probably have you back on the road in a few hours?" Ellie checked her watch. The board meeting was still salvageable if they hurried. "I have an important meeting at the Lakeside Resort this afternoon." "I'll get you there," Jack said with the quiet confidence of a man who kept his promises. Within minutes, Jack had secured the Mercedes to his truck using a tow rig he extracted from beneath a tarp in the truck bed. The efficiency of his movements suggested this wasn't his first roadside rescue. As they drove toward Oak Ridge, Ellie studied Jack's profile. His hands rested easily on the wheel, a gold wedding band catching the sunlight. The truck's interior was surprisingly clean, with an old leather-bound book wedged beside the seat and a small silver frame on the dashboard showing a young woman in military uniform. "Your daughter?" Ellie asked, nodding toward the photograph. Jack's expression softened. "My late wife, Sarah. Vietnam War Memorial Dedication Ceremony, 1982. She served as a nurse." "I'm sorry," Ellie said, feeling a genuine pang of sympathy. "Recently. 8 years ago. Cancer." His tone was matter-of-fact, but Ellie recognized the slight tightening around his eyes. "You're heading to the resort for business or pleasure?" "Definitely business." Ellie straightened her blazer unconsciously. "I'm presenting to my company's board of directors and potential investors." Jack nodded, seeming to absorb this information without judgment. "Technology company, I'm guessing." Ellie raised an eyebrow, surprised by his perception. He tapped his temple with a finger. "You've checked your phone 14 times since we started driving. Despite having no signal, not many people that connected to their devices unless they're in tech." "Impressive observation," Ellie admitted. "Yes, medical technology, Blackwood Technologies." Jack whistled low. "The neural implant people read about your company in Popular Mechanics last year. You're doing important work." Before Ellie could respond, Jack turned the truck onto a side road that led into the small town of Oak Ridge. Unlike the polished tourist havens around Lake Tahoe, Oak Ridge had the authentic feel of a working community. They passed a diner with a blinking neon sign, a hardware store with rocking chairs displayed on the porch, and a small park where older men played chess on concrete tables. At the edge of town, Jack pulled into a large lot surrounded by a chain-link fence. A hand-painted sign read Ramsey's Restoration. Behind the main building, Ellie glimpsed rows of vintage cars in various states of repair. "Welcome to my humble establishment," Jack said with a hint of pride as he maneuvered the truck and Mercedes through the gate. The garage interior was immaculate tools organized on pegboards, floor swept clean, workbenches arranged with methodical precision. Through an open door, Ellie spotted an office with filing cabinets, a desk with an ancient computer, and walls covered with framed certificates and photographs. "You're a restoration specialist," Ellie observed as Jack carefully unhitched her car. Among other things, he replied, guiding the Mercedes onto a hydraulic lift. Special focus on European classics. Your 280 SL is in good hands. Ellie watched as Jack moved around the shop, gathering tools and parts. Despite his age, she guessed early to mid-50s, he moved with an economy of motion that suggested years of physical training. Military, she asked. Jack paused, looking up from the parts drawer he was searching. Navy. 20 years. How'd you know? The way you move, the way you assess those men on the road, the organizational system in here. She gestured around the shop. Everything in its place. A ghost of a smile crossed Jack's face. Not much gets past you, Ms. Blackwood. Ellie, she corrected automatically, surprising herself. Jack nodded, accepting the invitation to informality. He bent over the engine, hands moving with practiced efficiency. Ellie found herself admiring his competence, a quality she respected regardless of the field. The garage phone rang, its harsh jangle breaking the comfortable silence. Jack wiped his hands on a rag and picked up the receiver. Ramsey's Restoration. Ellie couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but she watched as Jack's expression transformed from professional attention to worried concentration. When he asked, his voice tight, "Did Dr. Miller see her yet?" A pause. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Don't let them move her until I arrive." He hung up and turned to Ellie, his calm demeanor now underlaid with tension. "I need to step out. My mother, she's at Pinecrest Care Center. Had a fall." "Of course," Ellie said. "Is there anything I can do?" Jack shook his head. "The fuel pump is on the workbench. I'll be back as soon as I can to finish up. Feel free to use the office phone if you need to make calls. Landline works fine." Without waiting for a response, Jack grabbed his keys and headed for the door, his movements now charged with urgency. Left alone in the garage, Ellie found herself at a loss. She wasn't accustomed to being stranded without resources. After exploring the small waiting area and finding nothing but outdated car magazines, she wandered into Jack's office. The space revealed more about the man than he'd shared voluntarily. Citations and medals in shadow boxes spoke of a distinguished military career. Photographs showed a younger Jack in uniform beside a beautiful dark-haired woman, Sarah, presumably. Others captured moments with an elderly woman who had Jack's eyes and determined chin. What caught Ellie's attention, however, were the stacks of medical bills on the desk, many stamped "Final Notice" in angry red letters. Beside them lay a letter from Heartland Bank, its language leaving no room for interpretation. Foreclosure proceedings will commence in 30 days if payment is not received in full. The ringing of the office phone startled her away from the desk. After a moment's hesitation, she answered. "Ramsey's Restoration." "Mr. Ramsey," a formal male voice inquired. "He's unavailable at the moment. This is Eleanor Blackwood. Can I take a message?" A pause. "This is Robert Collins from Heartland Bank. It's regarding his outstanding loan. Please have him call me immediately. This is his final opportunity to arrange payment before we proceed with foreclosure." "I understand," Ellie said, her mind racing. "I'll make sure he gets the message." After hanging up, Ellie sat in Jack's desk chair, processing what she'd learned. A skilled mechanic and military veteran was about to lose his business while caring for an ailing mother. It was a story playing out across America, people who had given everything to their country now struggling to keep their heads above water. The contrast with her own financial reality wasn't lost on her. The Mercedes outside was one of 3 classic cars she owned, mere playthings compared to her penthouse in San Francisco and lake house in Tahoe. Yet here was Jack Ramsey, whose expertise had likely saved her from more than just car trouble today, facing financial ruin. As Ellie contemplated this, her phone chimed with a text message cell service apparently restored in town. It was from Lawrence Bennett, chairman of Blackwood Technologies Board. "Received troubling information about your personal stability. Board members concerned about leadership transition. Vital you address these concerns at meeting. Bring spouse if possible to reinforce commitment, charm, stability narrative." Ellie's jaw tightened. This was Victor's work. Her ex-husband's manipulative fingerprints were all over it. After their divorce 12 years ago, Victor Mercer had systematically worked to undermine her professionally, and his recent position at Syntec gave him the perfect platform to influence her board. His narrative was always the same: a divorced, childless woman in her 50s couldn't possibly be stable enough to lead a major corporation. The unfairness of it burned, but corporate politics rarely operated on fairness. What she needed was a countermove, something to neutralize Victor's influence and secure the board's confidence long enough to unveil her new neural implant breakthrough. Ellie's gaze drifted back to the foreclosure notice, then to the photo of Jack in his naval uniform. An idea began to form: outrageous, unprecedented, but potentially beneficial to them both. When Jack returned an hour later, his face was drawn with worry. He nodded briefly to Ellie before returning to work on the Mercedes, his movements now mechanical, driven by muscle memory rather than conscious thought. "How's your mother?" Ellie asked, leaning against a workbench. "Stable, fractured hip. At her age." He trailed off, focusing intently on connecting the new fuel pump. "Jack," Ellie said, her decision made, "I'd like to propose a business arrangement." He looked up, wariness evident in his expression. "What kind of arrangement?" "I need a husband for a week. You need $250 to $1,000 to save your business and cover your mother's medical bills." Jack's hands stilled. For a long moment, he simply stared at her. "Excuse me, my board believes I'm too unstable to lead the company because I'm single. My ex-husband is orchestrating a takeover through Syntec. I need to present an image of domestic stability at an investor's retreat this week." Jack straightened, wiping his hands slowly on a rag. "You want to hire me to pretend to be your husband?" "Precisely. 1 week, $250,000, enough to clear your debt and have a cushion for your mother's care." His expression hardened. "I don't take charity, Miss Blackwood." "This isn't charity. It's a business transaction." Ellie maintained eye contact, her voice level. "You provide a service. I provide compensation. The service being deception." Jack tossed the rag onto the workbench. "Not interested." Ellie hadn't expected him to agree immediately, but his flat refusal surprised her. Most people would at least contemplate such a sum. "May I ask why?" "Because integrity isn't for sale." Jack turned back to the Mercedes. "I'll have your car ready in 30 minutes. Ellie watched him work, reassessing her approach. This wasn't a man who would be swayed by financial incentives alone. She needed to appeal to something deeper. "What if it's not just about money?" she asked quietly. "What if my company's work could help people like your mother?" Jack's movements slowed, though he didn't look up. "Blackwood Technologies is developing neural implants that could revolutionize treatment for degenerative conditions, including advanced Alzheimer's." Now she had his attention. Jack turned, his expression guarded but interested. "How advanced?" "We're preparing for final FDA trials. The preliminary results have been significant." Jack studied her face, looking for deception. "And Syntec wants to buy you out." "To shelve the technology," Ellie confirmed. "Our implant would be affordable, accessible. Syntec's current treatment protocols cost 5 times as much and require ongoing medication. They'd rather buy us and bury the research than compete." She could see him processing this information, weighing it against his principles. "Even if what you're saying is true, pretending to be married is a small deception to prevent a greater injustice," Ellie finished. "Think about how many families like yours could benefit from this technology." Jack ran a hand through his hair, conflict evident in his posture. "I need to think about it." "The meeting is at 4, Ellie said, glancing at her watch. "I'll need an answer before then." Jack nodded once, then returned to the Mercedes. The garage fell silent except for the metallic sounds of his work and the ticking of the wall clock. By the time he lowered the car from the hydraulic lift, Ellie could see Jack had reached a decision. His movements were decisive again, his expression resolved. "One condition," he said, wiping his hands clean. This stays strictly professional. A business arrangement, nothing more. Agreed, Ellie said, extending her hand. Partners. Jack's large hand enveloped hers, his grip firm. Partners. As they shook on their unusual arrangement, neither could have anticipated how this simple agreement would change their lives or the dangers that awaited them at the lakeside resort. The lakeside resort rose from the shores of Lake Tahoe like a modern fortress of glass and stone, its floor-to-ceiling windows reflecting the pristine blue waters and surrounding pine forests. Guests arrived in luxury vehicles, greeted by valets in crisp uniforms who moved with the practiced efficiency of those accustomed to catering to the ultra-wealthy. Jack sat in the passenger seat of the Mercedes, now running flawlessly after his repairs. He wore the only suit he owned, a navy blue ensemble purchased for Sarah's funeral 8 years ago. Beside him, Ellie navigated the winding entrance drive with confidence, looking every inch the successful CEO in her tailored charcoal suit and simple pearl necklace. Remember the backstory, she said, pulling up to the valet stand. We met 3 years ago at a veterans charity auction. You were restoring a '65 Mustang that was being auctioned. I outbid everyone, but then donated the car back to raise more funds. You were impressed by my integrity. I was impressed by your generosity, Jack continued, rehearsing the script they developed during the drive. We married quietly last year because we both value privacy. Good, Ellie nodded. The board knows I've been seeing someone, but I've kept details vague. This won't seem completely out of left field. As the valet opened Ellie's door, Jack emerged from the passenger side, buttoning his jacket. He surveyed the entrance area with the automatic situational awareness he developed during his military years, noting exits, analyzing other guests, identifying potential choke points. Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood. The concierge approached with a tablet in hand. Actually, Jack began. Yes, Ellie interrupted smoothly, taking Jack's arm. We're here for the Blackwood Technologies board meeting? The concierge smiled professionally. Of course, everything is prepared in the lakeside ballroom. Your suite is ready as well, the presidential, as requested. Jack's expression remained neutral, though Ellie could feel a slight tension in his arm. This was their first test sharing accommodations hadn't been discussed. Perfect, Ellie said, steering Jack toward the lobby. We'll freshen up first. The presidential suite occupied the entire top floor of the resort's east wing, offering panoramic views of the lake through walls of glass. The interior featured a spacious living area, dining room, full kitchen, and master bedroom with an ensuite bathroom larger than Jack's entire office. Once the bellhop departed, Jack released a low whistle. Quite a step up from the Oak Ridge Motel 6. I should hope so. At $5,000 a night, Ellie replied, setting her briefcase on a marble-top desk. Jack's eyebrows shot up. 5 thou. You know what? Never mind. He moved to the windows, taking in the view. You didn't mention sleeping arrangements. The couch converts to a bed, Ellie said, nodding toward the living area. I'll take the bedroom, if that's acceptable. More than acceptable. Jack loosened his tie slightly. So what's the plan? Ellie checked her watch. The board reception begins in 1 hour. That's where I'll introduce you to everyone. The formal meeting is tomorrow morning, followed by 3 days of bonding activities with potential investors. Bonding activities, Jack repeated skeptically. Golf, fishing, wine tasting. Ellie clarified. Ostensibly recreational, but really just business conducted in casual settings. Jack nodded slowly. And these investors, they're the ones who need convincing that you're stable enough to lead. Some of them, others are already in my corner. The key figure is Douglas Hemsworth. Ellie pulled up a photo on her tablet and handed it to Jack. 70 years old, old money conservative, controls about 30% of potential investment capital. He's traditional, believes in family values and stability. Jack studied the photo, his expression unreadable. I see. Something wrong, Ellie asked. No, Jack said, perhaps too quickly. Just getting a feel for the players? He handed back the tablet. What about the opposition? Victor Mercer, my ex-husband, currently serving as Syntex Director of Development? Ellie's voice took on an edge. He's been working behind the scenes to convince the board that I'm emotionally unsuited for leadership due to my failure to maintain a stable personal life. Sounds like a real prince, Jack commented dryly. Victor believes appearances are everything. Substance is secondary to presentation. Ellie began unpacking her suitcase, hanging clothes in the closet with methodical precision. That's why this charade needs to be convincing. He'll be looking for any inconsistency. Jack moved to the living area, staring out at the lake. I should warn you, I'm not much for pretense. What you see is what you get. That's exactly what makes you perfect for this, Ellie said, emerging from the bedroom. No one would believe I married a polished corporate type, but someone authentic, grounded, with actual principles that they might believe. Jack turned, studying her with those penetrating blue eyes. Is that how you see me after less than a day? I'm good at reading people, Ellie said simply. It's kept me alive in corporate America for 30 years. A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Jack instinctively moved toward it, positioning himself to the side as he checked the peephole, a habit from his military days. Room service, he reported, relaxing slightly. A uniformed waiter wheeled in a cart bearing a bottle of champagne in an ice bucket and a platter of hors d'oeuvres. Compliments of the board of directors, Mrs. Blackwood. They're looking forward to meeting your husband. After the waiter departed, Jack examined the champagne bottle. Dom Perignon, fancy. We should both stay sharp tonight, Ellie said, ignoring the champagne in favor of the bottled water also provided. Victor will be watching for any opportunity to undermine me. Jack nodded, returning to the window. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the lake, painting the water in shades of gold and deep blue. For a moment, they stood in companionable silence, each contemplating the evening ahead. Why neural implants? Jack asked suddenly. Of all the medical technologies you could have pursued, why that specific field? Ellie was surprised by the question most people asked about profit margins or market potential, not motivation. My father had early onset Alzheimer's. Brilliant man, physics professor at Berkeley. Started forgetting things at 53. By 58, he couldn't recognize my mother. She moved to stand beside Jack at the window. I was getting my MBA at Stanford when he was diagnosed. Switched my focus to biomedical enterprise. Started Blackwood Technologies with my thesis project and a loan from my grandmother. That's, impressive, Jack said, and she could tell he meant it. What about you from Navy to auto restoration? Seems like a significant shift. Jack's reflection in the glass showed a brief smile. Not as much as you'd think. Both require attention to detail, problem solving, working with your hands. I restored cars with my father growing up. After Sarah died, it felt right to return to it. The mention of his late wife created a momentary pause in the conversation, an acknowledgement of loss they both understood in different ways. We should get ready, Ellie said finally, checking her watch. The reception starts in 30 minutes. As she turned toward the bedroom, Jack's phone rang. He checked the screen, his expression immediately concerned. It's the care center. I need to take this. Ellie nodded and stepped into the bedroom, closing the door to give him privacy. Through the door, she could hear the low murmur of his voice, though not the words themselves. When she emerged 15 minutes later, wearing a simple but elegant black dress, she found Jack standing on the balcony, his posture rigid with tension. Everything all right? She asked, joining him outside. My mother's doctor wants to try a new treatment protocol, Jack said, his voice carefully controlled. Experimental. Insurance won't cover it. How much? $80,000, Jack answered, his jaw tight. On top of her existing care costs. Ellie considered this information. Is it promising? The only thing that might help at this stage? Jack's hands gripped the balcony railing. I'll figure something out. Ellie touched his arm lightly. The advance payment for our arrangement. Use it for your mother. Jack stiffened. I haven't earned that yet. Consider it a retainer. When he started to protest, she continued, this is still a business transaction. Jack, I'm not offering charity. For a long moment, Jack was silent, struggling with his pride. Finally, he nodded once. Thank you. You can thank me by being convincing downstairs, Ellie said, professional once more. Ready. Jack straightened his tie and offered his arm. As I'll ever be. The lakeside ballroom hummed with the particular energy of wealth and power, quiet conversations that determined fates of companies, casual handshakes that sealed multi-million-dollar deals, champagne flutes raised in toasts that masked calculated assessments. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the assembled group of board members, investors, and their spouses, all dressed in the understated luxury that signified true affluence. Ellie entered with Jack at her side, her arm linked through his. She felt the momentary lull in conversation, the subtle shift of attention as heads turned to observe the arrival of Blackwood Technologies' CEO and her unexpected companion. Lawrence Bennett, board chairman, approached first, a tall, slender man in his 60s with silver hair and rimless glasses. Eleanor, wonderful to see you. His gaze shifted to Jack, curiosity evident beneath his polished manners. And this must be my husband, Ellie said smoothly. Jack Ramsey. Jack. Lawrence Bennett, our board chairman. Jack shook the offered hand with firm confidence. A pleasure, Mr. Bennett. Ellie speaks highly of your leadership. Bennett's eyebrows rose slightly at the familiar use of Ellie, a name few dared use with the formidable CEO. I had no idea Eleanor was planning to bring a guest. A pleasant surprise. We value our privacy, Jack replied with a slight smile. Ellie more than most. Indeed. Bennett's assessment of Jack was swift and professional. What line of work are you in, Mr. Ramsey? Automotive restoration? Jack answered without hesitation. Specializing in European classics. Jack restored my father's Mercedes, Ellie added, the practiced line emerging naturally. That's how we met. Bennett nodded, seemingly satisfied with this explanation. I look forward to hearing more. Please circulate. Everyone's eager to meet you. As Bennett moved away, Ellie guided Jack deeper into the room. Good start, she murmured. Bennett's on the fence about the Syntec offer. We need him in our corner. The next hour passed in a blur of introductions and small talk. Jack, despite his initial reservations, proved surprisingly adept at navigating the social currents. His straightforward manner and evident intelligence earned respectful nods from board members accustomed to the flattery and obfuscation of corporate politics. Ellie watched with growing appreciation as Jack conversed with Bernard Watkins, the board's most technically knowledgeable member, about the engineering challenges of neural interfaces. Jack's questions were insightful, drawing on his mechanical expertise to understand the biological applications. Your husband is quite impressive, remarked Patricia Winters, the board's only other female member, sidling up to Ellie with a fresh glass of champagne. Where have you been hiding him? We're both private people, Ellie replied, maintaining the narrative. Patricia's gaze was shrewd. He's nothing like Victor. Thank goodness for that, Ellie said with genuine feeling. He looks at you differently, too, Patricia observed. Victor always looked at you like you were an asset to be managed. This one looks at you like, she paused, searching for the right words, like you're the most interesting puzzle he's ever encountered. Before Ellie could respond, a familiar voice cut through the ambient chatter, sending a chill down her spine. Eleanor, radiant as ever. Victor Mercer approached, glass in hand, his tall frame impeccably attired in a tailored gray suit. At 54, he remained handsome in a polished, almost artificial way, his brown hair artfully colored to conceal gray, his tan maintained year-round, his smile practiced to display perfect veneers. Victor, Ellie acknowledged coolly. I wasn't aware Syntec representatives were invited tonight. Last-minute addition to the guest list, Victor replied smoothly. Lawrence thought it would be valuable to have all potential partners present. His gaze shifted to Jack, who had disengaged from his conversation and was now moving toward them. "And who is this? My husband," Ellie said, feeling a strange satisfaction at the brief flash of shock that crossed Victor's face before his mask of congeniality reasserted itself. "Husband, my," Victor extended his hand. "Victor Mercer. I'm Eleanor's ex-husband. She never mentioned she'd remarried." Jack clasped Victor's hand perhaps a fraction too firmly. "Jack Ramsey. Ellie values her privacy." "Ellie," Victor repeated, his smile tightening. "How informal." Jack's arm slipped around Ellie's waist in a gesture that appeared natural, but sent an unexpected warmth through her. "Life's too short for unnecessary formality." Victor's gaze hardened as he assessed Jack, taking in the suit that, while well-made, clearly wasn't custom, the lack of expensive accessories, the calloused hands that spoke of manual labor. "And what do you do, Mr. Ramsey?" "I restore classic cars," Jack replied evenly. "And it's just Ramsey, or Jack. I was never one for the mister." Victor's smile didn't reach his eyes. How fascinating. From CEO of a tech company to mechanic. "Eleanor, you certainly have eclectic taste." Jack tensed beside her, but Ellie squeezed his hand in warning. "Jack understands more about integrity and craftsmanship than most executives I know," she said, her voice pleasant but edged. "Now, if you'll excuse us, I see Douglas Hemsworth has arrived." They moved away, leaving Victor staring after them with calculation in his eyes. "I don't like him," Jack muttered. "No one does," Ellie replied. "That's why he's perfect for Syntec." As they approached the far side of the ballroom, an elderly gentleman turned to greet them. Douglas Hemsworth stood straight despite his 70 years, his white hair cropped short, his bearing unmistakably military even in a custom tuxedo. His sharp blue eyes assessed Jack with immediate interest. "Eleanor," he said, his voice still carrying the hint of a southern accent. "This must be the husband I've heard so much about this evening." "Douglas, may I present Jack Ramsey," Ellie said. "Jack, Douglas Hemsworth, our most valued potential investor." As Jack extended his hand, something shifted in Hemsworth's expression, a flash of recognition quickly concealed. "Have we met before, son?" Jack maintained his composure, though Ellie felt a subtle tension in his posture. "I don't believe so, sir." Hemsworth studied Jack's face intently. "You seem familiar. Military background. Navy, 20 years. Ah." Hemsworth nodded slowly. "I was Marine Corps myself. Perhaps we crossed paths somewhere along the way." He turned to Ellie. "You've chosen well, Eleanor. Military men understand commitment." The conversation continued, with Hemsworth asking pointed questions about Blackwood Technologies' research timeline and market strategy. Ellie answered with practiced ease, aware that Jack was unusually quiet beside her. When Hemsworth finally moved on to greet other guests, Ellie guided Jack toward a quieter corner of the ballroom. "What was that about?" she asked in a low voice. "Do you know him?" Jack hesitated, conflict evident in his expression. "We may have crossed paths in the Gulf." "And you didn't think to mention this." "I wasn't sure until I saw him in person," Jack said defensively. "It was over 25 years ago, in a war zone. He was a colonel then." Ellie processed this unexpected complication. "Will he recognize you?" "I don't think so. I was just one of many sailors under his command during a joint operation." Jack ran a hand through his hair. "But if he does, then we adjust," Ellie said decisively. "For now, we stick to the plan." The remainder of the evening passed without incident, though Ellie noticed Victor watching them carefully from across the room, occasionally engaged in hushed conversation with board members. More concerning was the way Jack continued to glance at Hemsworth, a troubled expression crossing his face when he thought Ellie wasn't looking. By the time they returned to the suite, it was past midnight. Jack loosened his tie with a sigh of relief as Ellie kicked off her heels. You did well tonight, she said, moving to the bar to pour herself a small glass of scotch. The board seemed impressed. Hemsworth bothers me, Jack admitted, accepting the glass she offered. If he remembers me. How likely is that? Ellie asked, sitting on the sofa with her own drink. Jack joined her, leaving a respectful distance between them. The operation went bad, really bad. Hemsworth made a call that saved a lot of lives, including mine. Men don't forget something like that. Would it be so terrible if he recognized you? Ellie asked. It might actually strengthen our cover the coincidence of it. Jack shook his head. Hemsworth values honesty above all else. If he realizes I'm lying about our marriage, then we make sure he doesn't, Ellie said simply. We have 3 more days to convince everyone that this is real. We just need to be careful. Jack nodded, though the concern remained in his eyes. He raised his glass slightly. To convincing performances, Ellie clinked her glass against his. To partnerships of convenience. They drank in companionable silence, each lost in thought as moonlight spilled through the windows, painting silver patterns across the carpet. Outside, Lake Tahoe stretched dark and vast, a reminder of deeper currents beneath seemingly calm surfaces. Neither of them noticed the small red light blinking on the underside of the coffee table, a listening device planted hours earlier by someone who knew exactly what they were looking for. Jack woke to the sound of movement in the suite's kitchen. For a moment, he was disoriented. The unfamiliar luxury of the converted sofa bed, a stark contrast to his modest bedroom above the garage in Oak Ridge. Then memory returned the deal with Eleanor Blackwood, the reception, the unexpected appearance of Colonel Hemsworth. The digital clock on the entertainment center read 5:30 a.m. Jack sat up, running a hand through his hair. He'd slept fitfully, dreams filled with desert sand and explosions, memories he thought long buried. Coffee. Ellie appeared in the kitchen doorway, already dressed in a navy pantsuit, hair pulled back in a neat bun. She held 2 mugs, offering one to Jack. Thanks, he said, accepting the steaming cup. You're up early. I always am. She sat in an armchair opposite the sofa bed. Board meeting preparation. I need to review the quarterly projections one more time. Jack nodded, taking a sip of the coffee strong and black. Exactly how he preferred it. Another point for Ellie's observational skills. What's the agenda for today? Board meeting at 9, lunch with investors at noon, golf tournament this afternoon, though I've arranged for us to skip that in favor of a private tour of the prototype manufacturing facility in Carson City. Ellie's tone was brisk, professional. I thought it would be more convincing if I showed enthusiasm about sharing my work with my husband. Logical, Jack agreed. He studied her over the rim of his coffee mug. In the early morning light, without the performative aspects of the previous evening, Ellie looked different, no less formidable, but somehow more human. There were faint shadows beneath her eyes, a slight tension in her shoulders that spoke of the weight she carried. Did you sleep at all? He asked. The question seemed to surprise her. A few hours. I don't need much. Everyone needs sleep. Ellie! She glanced up sharply at the concern in his voice. I'll rest when the deal is secured. She set down her mug and stood. I should continue preparing. The bathroom is yours whenever you're ready. Jack watched her retreat to the bedroom, closing the door firmly behind her. Interesting woman, brilliant and driven, yet carrying a vulnerability she worked hard to conceal. In another life, under different circumstances, he might have been genuinely intrigued. But this wasn't another life. This was a business arrangement, nothing more. Jack rose and moved to the windows, drawing back the curtains to reveal the spectacular sunrise over Lake Tahoe. The lake shimmered with golden light, mist rising from its surface like spirits ascending. It was breathtaking, the kind of view Sarah would have loved. The thought of his late wife brought a familiar ache, dulled by time but never truly absent. 8 years a widower, and he still caught himself turning to share moments with a woman no longer there. Shaking off the melancholy, Jack gathered his clothes and headed for the shower. Today would require focus. Victor Mercer was clearly suspicious, and Hemsworth's presence added an unexpected complication. He couldn't afford distractions, whether from the past or the present. 45 minutes later, freshly showered and dressed in the second of the 3 suits he'd packed, Jack emerged to find Ellie on the phone, her voice tight with controlled anger. That's completely unacceptable. Lawrence, the agenda was set weeks ago. She paced the length of the living room, free hand gesturing emphatically. Victor has no place in this discussion until after the board has reviewed our Phase 3 results. She fell silent, listening, her expression darkening. I understand. Yes, we'll be there. She ended the call with a sharp tap on the screen. Problem? Jack asked. Ellie turned, seeming almost surprised to find him there. Victor has maneuvered his way into the board meeting. He's presenting Syntech's acquisition proposal immediately after my research update. Is that unusual? It's unprecedented, Ellie said, dropping onto the sofa. Board policy requires new proposals to be submitted at least 72 hours in advance for review. Jack frowned. Then how? Because 3 board members requested the exception, and Lawrence doesn't have the spine to refuse? Ellie's composure slipped for a moment, revealing genuine worry. Victor's been busy. He must have lobbied them all night. Jack considered this information. What's our countermove? The question seemed to refocus her. Our presentation needs to be flawless. The neural implant prototype results are strong 67% improvement in neural pathway reconnection in Alzheimer's patients during clinical trials. That's significant, Jack said, his thoughts turning to his mother. Life-changing, even. Exactly, but Syntech will argue that their drug therapy approach is safer, despite being less effective and significantly more expensive. Ellie stood, straightening her jacket. We need to emphasize the human impact, the quality of life improvements, the affordability, the reduced caregiver burden. Jack nodded slowly, an idea forming. What if you had a first-hand account? Someone who could speak to the caregiver experience. Ellie tilted her head, considering. The board would respond to that. Personal testimony can be powerful. Then let me speak, Jack said. Not as your husband, but as the son of an Alzheimer's patient, someone who's lived the reality of this disease day in and day out. Surprise registered on Ellie's face. You'd do that, share something so personal? If it helps secure funding for technology that could help others like my mother. Absolutely. Jack met her gaze steadily. It's the right thing to do. Something shifted in Ellie's expression, a newfound respect, perhaps even admiration. Thank you, Jack. That could make all the difference. Before either could say more, a knock at the door interrupted them. Jack moved to answer it, checking the peephole first, a habit Ellie had noticed yesterday. A uniformed hotel employee stood outside with a large manila envelope. Delivery for Mr. Ramsey. Jack accepted the envelope with a puzzled frown. Thank you. Once the door closed, he examined the package. No return address, just his name printed in block letters. Were you expecting anything for me? Ellie shook her head, moving closer. What is it? Jack carefully opened the envelope and extracted several photographs. His expression darkened as he flipped through them. Jack, what's wrong? Without speaking, he handed her the photos. They showed Jack's garage in Oak Ridge, door forced open, interior ransacked, tools scattered across the floor. The final image showed a workbench with a message spray-painted in red, back off. When were these taken? Ellie asked, her voice tight. Timestamp says 3:27 a.m. Jack's jaw clenched. Someone's sending a message. Victor, Ellie said with certainty. This is how he operates: intimidation, pressure points, escalation if necessary. Jack took the photos back, studying them with cold anger. Your ex-husband just broke into my place of business and threatened me. I'm sorry, Jack. I didn't think he'd... This changes things. Jack interrupted, his voice hard. This isn't just about your company anymore. He's made it personal. Ellie watched as Jack moved to the phone, dialing with quick, decisive movements. Who are you calling? Sheriff's Department in Oak Ridge, Jack replied. Then a friend who can secure what's left of my garage until we get back. As Jack reported the break-in, Ellie observed the transformation in his demeanor. The calm, measured mechanic had been replaced by something else, a man with military precision and cold determination. She'd glimpsed this side of him briefly on the mountain road, but now it was fully evident. When he finished the calls, Jack turned to her. Decision made. I'm still in, but the rules have changed. I'm not just playing a part anymore. What does that mean? Ellie asked cautiously. It means, Jack said, sliding the photos back into the envelope, that I'm now personally invested in making sure Victor Mercer doesn't win. The conviction in his voice sent a shiver down Ellie's spine, half apprehension, half something else she wasn't ready to name. Jack Ramsey had just become an active ally rather than a hired actor, and she suspected Victor had made a serious miscalculation in provoking him. As they prepared to leave for the board meeting, Ellie couldn't help but wonder had Victor inadvertently strengthened the very facade he was trying to expose. And more concerning, what would he do next when this tactic failed? The Blackwood Technologies board meeting was held in an executive conference room on the resort's second floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered sweeping views of the lake, while a massive mahogany table dominated the space, surrounded by 14 high-backed leather chairs. A state-of-the-art projection system and multiple display screens indicated this was no ordinary meeting room. Decisions made here affected millions of dollars and potentially thousands of lives. Jack sat in the observers section, a row of chairs positioned against the wall, alongside spouses of other board members and key administrative staff. From this vantage point, he had a clear view of Ellie at the head of the table, flanked by Lawrence Bennett and Patricia Winters. Victor Mercer sat midway down the right side, his posture relaxed but his gaze predatory. The first hour of the meeting covered standard business quarterly financials, market positioning, regulatory updates. Jack observed the dynamics with interest, noting which board members deferred to Ellie's expertise and which seemed aligned with Victor's camp. Despite the break-in at his garage, Jack maintained a calm exterior, though his mind was cataloging threats and calculating countermoves with military precision. When the agenda turned to the neural implant project, Ellie rose and moved to the presentation screen. Ladies and gentlemen, as you know, Blackwood Technologies has been pioneering a new approach to neural pathway restoration in patients with degenerative conditions. She activated the display, showing brain scan images side by side. On the left, a typical Alzheimer's patient before our implant. On the right, the same patient 3 months after implantation. The difference was striking even to Jack's untrained eye. The before image showed dark, inactive regions throughout the brain, while the after image glowed with renewed activity patterns. Our Phase 3 trials have exceeded expectations. Ellie continued. 67% of patients showed significant improvement in cognitive function and memory retention. 38% demonstrated restoration of previously lost skills and recognition of family members. She advanced through slides showing clinical data, patient testimonials, and cost projections. Jack watched the board members' reactions, noting the genuine interest from most, with the notable exception of Victor, and 3 older men Jack assumed were the ones who had advocated for his inclusion. Most importantly, Ellie concluded, our implant represents a one-time cost of approximately $45,000 compared to Syntec's drug protocol, which costs patients over $30,000 annually for the rest of their lives. We are not merely offering a treatment, we are offering a solution. As Ellie returned to her seat, Victor rose smoothly, moving to take her place at the presentation screen. An impressive presentation. Eleanor, truly groundbreaking work. His voice carried just the right note of admiration, though his eyes remained cold. However, before the board makes any decisions about funding allocation, I believe you should consider Syntec's proposal in full. Victor activated his own presentation, displaying the Syntec logo prominently. While Blackwood Technologies has focused exclusively on invasive neural implants, procedures that carry significant surgical risk, Syntec has developed a comprehensive approach to degenerative conditions. He advanced through slides showing Syntec's various drug therapies, emphasizing safety profiles and FDA approval status. Our newest protocol has shown a 43% improvement in cognitive retention, not as high as Eleanor's implant claims. I grant you, but with zero surgical risk and established regulatory approval. Jack noticed Victor's careful wording, implying Ellie's data might be exaggerated while presenting Syntec's offerings as guaranteed. It was a skilled manipulation, and from the nodding of several board members, an effective one. Furthermore, Victor continued, Syntec is prepared to acquire Blackwood Technologies for $1.2 billion, a generous premium of 30% over current market valuation. This would provide immediate return to shareholders while allowing Eleanor's research to continue under Syntec's established regulatory framework. The room fell silent as board members processed this information. Jack could see the calculation in their eyes weighing breakthrough technology against guaranteed profit, potential against certainty. Lawrence Bennett cleared his throat. Thank you, Victor. This is certainly a compelling offer that the board must consider carefully. He turned to Ellie. Eleanor, would you care to respond? Ellie rose, her composure unshaken despite the clear threat to her company's independence. I appreciate Syntec's interest in our work. However, there are several critical factors the board should consider before making any decision. She activated the display again, showing a new slide, a comparison of patient outcomes between the two approaches. Syntec's protocol requires lifelong treatment with significant side effects reported in 38% of patients. Our implant is a one-time procedure with side effects in less than 5% of cases. Victor interrupted smoothly. Side effects which include potential brain hemorrhage, infection, and device rejection, all potentially fatal outcomes. In less than 1% of patients, Ellie countered, compared to liver damage in 12% of patients on Syntec's protocol. The exchange continued, with Victor emphasizing regulatory hurdles and Ellie highlighting patient outcomes. Jack watched the board members' expressions shift between the competing narratives, their allegiances not yet decided. Finally, Bennett raised a hand. I think we've covered the technical aspects thoroughly. Before we move to discussion, I understand Eleanor has one more perspective to offer. He nodded toward Jack. Mr. Ramsey. Jack rose, straightening his jacket as he moved to the front of the room. He could feel Victor's calculating gaze following him, searching for weakness or inconsistency. Thank you for allowing me to speak, Jack began, his voice steady. I'm not here as Eleanor's husband today, but as the son of Ruth Ramsey, who has been living with Alzheimer's for the past 6 years. He paused, allowing his gaze to move across the board members. My mother was a high school English teacher for 42 years. She taught 3 generations of students in our small town. She could recite Shakespeare from memory and knew the birthday of every child she ever taught. Jack's voice remained even, though emotion ran beneath the surface. Now, at 84, she sometimes doesn't know her own name. She certainly doesn't recognize me. The medications she's on, similar to Syntec's protocol, cost $2,800 per month. They slow the progression, but don't stop it. He saw several board members shift uncomfortably, the abstract becoming personal through his testimony. When Eleanor explained her implant technology to me, I didn't see market potential or return on investment. I saw my mother remembering how to hold a fork again. I saw her recognizing her grandson's face. I saw dignity restored. Jack turned slightly, addressing Victor directly now. Syntec's approach keeps patients dependent on daily medication for the rest of their lives. Eleanor's approach offers them a chance to reclaim their lives. That's the fundamental difference here. He returned his attention to the board. You're not just deciding the fate of a company today, you're deciding the fate of millions of families like mine. I urge you to consider what that responsibility means. With a nod of thanks, Jack returned to his seat, aware of the silence that had fallen over the room. Ellie's expression revealed nothing, but her eyes conveyed gratitude as they briefly met his. Bennett cleared his throat again, visibly moved despite his efforts to maintain professional detachment. Thank you, Mr. Ramsey, that perspective is valuable. He turned to the board. I suggest we take a short break before continuing our discussion. As board members filed out for the recess, Jack remained seated, aware of Victor's approach without needing to look up. Quite the performance, Victor said quietly, stopping beside Jack's chair. Almost had me convince myself. Jack met his gaze evenly. Nothing I said was a lie. Perhaps not, Victor smiled thinly. But omission can be just as deceptive as falsehood. Wouldn't you agree? Is there a point to this conversation? Jack asked, his patience wearing thin. Victor leaned closer, dropping his voice to ensure no one else could hear. I know about your arrangement with Eleanor, the convenient timing, the sudden marriage, the financial transaction. It's all very transparent. Jack's expression remained neutral, though internally he processed this new threat. You seem to have an unhealthy obsession with your ex-wife's personal life? This isn't personal, Victor countered. It's business. Eleanor is making a critical error with this implant technology rushing to market without adequate safety protocols. Syntec can provide the oversight and regulatory expertise she lacks. Is that why you broke into my garage out of concern for safety protocols? A flash of genuine surprise crossed Victor's face before his mask reasserted itself. I have no idea what you're talking about. Jack studied him carefully, recognizing the momentary confusion as genuine. If Victor hadn't ordered the break-in, who had before he could pursue this line of thought? Ellie approached, her expression professionally pleasant for any observers. Victor, she acknowledged coolly, I see you've been chatting with my husband. Just getting better acquainted, Victor replied smoothly. Fascinating man you've married. Eleanor, full of surprises. The best people always are, Ellie said, placing a hand on Jack's arm, a gesture that appeared affectionate, but served to guide him away. If you'll excuse us, once they were out of earshot, in a quiet corner of the hallway, Ellie murmured. What did he want? To intimidate me, Jack replied. He claims to know about our arrangement. Ellie's grip on his arm tightened momentarily. Evidence or bluffing? Hard to tell, Jack admitted, but he seemed genuinely surprised when I mentioned the break-in. If not Victor, then who? Ellie frowned. Before Jack could respond, Douglas Hemsworth approached, his expression grave. Eleanor, Mr. Ramsey, might I have a word in private? Ellie exchanged a quick glance with Jack before nodding. Of course, Douglas. Hemsworth led them to a small meeting room off the main hallway, closing the door firmly behind them. He remained standing, his posture military straight despite his age. Your testimony was powerful, son, he said to Jack. Reminded me of another young man I knew once. Had the same direct way of cutting through nonsense to get to what matters. Jack tensed, recognizing the direction of the conversation. Thank you, sir. Hemsworth's sharp blue eyes assessed him carefully. Operation Desert Falcon, 1991. A reconnaissance mission gone sideways. Ring any bells? Ellie looked between the two men, realizing this was the military connection Jack had alluded to earlier. Jack met Hemsworth's gaze steadily. Yes, sir, it does. You were the young petty officer who carried 2 wounded Marines 3 miles through enemy territory after their helicopter went down. Hemsworth's voice carried a note of certainty. Refused evacuation until all your men were accounted for. I was just doing my job, Colonel, Jack replied, unconsciously reverting to Hemsworth's former rank. A slight smile crossed Hemsworth's face. So you do remember me? Yes, sir. I wasn't sure you'd remember me. I never forget the faces of men who demonstrate extraordinary courage, Hemsworth said simply. He turned to Ellie. Your husband received the Navy Cross for his actions that day. Eleanor, did you know that? Ellie shook her head, genuine surprise evident. He doesn't talk much about his service. Modest, too. Hemsworth nodded approvingly. He returned his attention to Jack. Which makes me wonder why a man of such integrity would participate in a charade. The room fell silent. Jack's expression remained composed, though Ellie could sense his internal struggle. "I'm not sure what you mean, Douglas," she said carefully. Hemsworth sighed. "Please, Eleanor, I've been in business longer than you've been alive. I recognize a convenient arrangement when I see one." He held up a hand to forestall her protest. "I'm not here to expose you. I'm here to understand why." Jack and Ellie exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. Finally, Jack spoke. "My mother needs specialized care that insurance won't cover. My business is facing foreclosure. Eleanor offered a solution that benefited us both." His voice was steady, unapologetic. "Everything I said about my mother's condition was true. Everything I said about believing in Eleanor's technology was true." Hemsworth considered this, then nodded slowly. "And the marriage? A necessary fiction," Ellie admitted. "Victor has been systematically undermining my leadership by suggesting I'm too unstable personally to lead the company through this critical phase. Because you're divorced and childless," Hemsworth stated flatly. "Because I prioritized building a company that could help millions over conforming to outdated expectations about a woman's role," Ellie corrected, a flash of genuine anger breaking through her professional facade. Hemsworth was silent for a long moment, weighing their words. "The Syntec offer is substantial," he said finally. "Many would consider it the safer choice." "Safer for whom?" Jack challenged. "Not for the patients who need this technology now. Not years from now after Syntec has modified it to maximize profit." Hemsworth turned to Ellie. "You believe your implant is ready for widespread adoption. With the final round of funding to complete FDA trials?" "Yes," Ellie answered without hesitation. "We've solved the biocompatibility issues that delayed previous generations. The results speak for themselves." Hemsworth nodded thoughtfully. "One last question, for both of you. This arrangement, is it still purely business?" The question caught them off guard. Jack and Ellie looked at each other, something unspoken passing between them. "It's complicated," Jack admitted finally. "The best things usually are," Hemsworth said with a knowing smile. He straightened. Decision made. "I'll support continuing independent funding for Blackwood Technologies on one condition." "Name it," Ellie said quickly. "Complete transparency moving forward." Hemsworth said, "No more convenient fictions. If your technology is as promising as the data suggests, it deserves to succeed on its own merits." Ellie nodded. "Agreed." "Good." Hemsworth moved toward the door, then paused. "One more thing. Victor Mercer has been making inquiries about both of you personal history, financial records, potential vulnerabilities. I suggest you watch your backs." With that warning, he left them alone in the small meeting room, the implications of his words hanging in the air between them. "Well," Ellie said finally, "that was unexpected." "Hemsworth is a good man," Jack replied. "Always was. I'm not surprised he saw through us." "He's also influential," Ellie noted. "If he supports us, others will follow." Jack nodded, though his mind had already shifted to Hemsworth's warning. "Victor's digging that concerns me. If he didn't order the break-in at my garage, someone else is targeting us." "Syntec has plenty of resources beyond Victor," Ellie said grimly. "Corporate espionage isn't uncommon in our industry." Jack moved to the window, scanning the grounds below with habitual vigilance. "We need to be more careful, change our security protocols, vary our routines." Ellie watched him, recognizing the shift to his military mindset. "You think we're in actual danger?" "I think," Jack said carefully, "that when billions of dollars are at stake, people make desperate choices." He turned back to her. "The board meeting resumes in 10 minutes. You should prepare." Ellie nodded, professional focus returning. "And the Carson City tour this afternoon?" "We proceed as planned," Jack decided. "But I drive." As they returned to the conference room, Jack maintained a casual demeanor while his senses remained on high alert. Hemsworth's warning, coupled with the mysterious break-in, suggested they were facing opposition more dangerous than mere corporate politics. Someone was willing to cross lines that even Victor Mercer apparently wouldn't, and Jack intended to be ready when they made their next move. The lake shimmered in the fading golden light, casting long shadows across the newly dedicated Veterans Rehabilitation Center. Where two souls had once stood as strangers, a mechanic with oil-stained hands and a CEO with walls around her heart, now stood partners in the truest sense. They had entered their arrangement as a business transaction, two separate lives intersecting briefly before continuing on their separate paths. Instead, they discovered that sometimes the most genuine connections begin with pretense, that vulnerability can be found in the places we least expect it. For Jack, the garage would never be just a business again. It had become a sanctuary of second chances. For Ellie, success was no longer measured in stock prices and boardroom victories, but in the faces of patients reclaiming stolen memories, in the quiet moments of genuine connection. They had faced corporate predators, confronted old ghosts, and challenged the boundaries between duty and desire. In doing so, they had rewritten a fundamental truth that partnerships forged in crisis often become the foundations that withstand the test of time. As the sun dipped below the mountains, painting the world in shades of promise, one might wonder how many of us wear masks in our daily lives, never knowing that behind them waits the very connection we've been searching for all along.